I saw a couple of jokes about you being in your 50s, right? So like
Yeah, yeah, I know, man.
that was pretty
So
awesome.
there's that. Like, yeah, yeah, for sure. But it's good, man. Just doing life and having trying to have fun in the process. So still doing the coaching thing. I love it. I wouldn't say I'm pivoting. I'd say it's just kind of like just a little bit of a veering, because obviously, weight loss is still a thing. It's still a forefront of everybody's minds. I still coach for that. But I think in that process of turning 50, and it's been on my mind for a while. Okay, I'm shifting my own, thought process around health and what health means and what strength means, more to kind of like almost like a durability type thing. I will not say the word longevity because I'm going to throw up in my mouth if I do, but like, you know what I mean? That sort of thing where it's like, okay, we're,
Yeah,
we're, we're going for the long haul, and it's something, I took for granted years and years, right? Where you're
yeah,
young and you don't wake up in the morning and feel like you fell out of a tree, right? Because you slept funny.
yeah, yeah.
I get sleeping injuries, that's a new thing, but yeah, but just kind of like helping people live for that durability piece, for that, capability piece, for that, years out of a nursing home piece, right? So yeah, and then, still rebooting some retreats this year, so just yeah, mixing it up a bit and trying to have fun with the process.
That's awesome, man. I'm happy to see you doing retreats again because I think that's like when I look at all the people in the industry that I met, whenever I think about you, like the first association is retreats. I think that's a very
Oh, okay.
original way to coach people. Also think it's probably the most productive when it comes to like group setting, right? There's a lot of value in that. Don't think a lot of people are replicating that sort of a model. I think you are pretty much a pioneer in the context of starting with that and then maintaining that approach and having that offer to your coaching system for many, many years now, because you've been doing this for, I mean, retreat specifically, for at least a decade, right? Maybe longer.
It's actually coming up to fairly close to that. I just looked, and this will be like the eighth kind of year. Now, of course, we missed a few years due to the pandemic, but there were some years where I ran two, and then this year I've just decided to sort of, okay, I'm going to take the winter season off, and then just really do my best to plan like the ultimate, experience for Crete specifically in October. Yeah, but it had started in 2018. It just kind of ran with it. And, I've just been super lucky to have amazing people that come to them, right? Because it's all about the people. And I'm lucky that those people return,
Mm.
sometimes year after year. So it's a ton of fun. And you're right. It's like bringing this coaching into this immersive experience, right? So
And I
love
assume
it.
you still do online coaching, right?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. So I do a mix still. So I do the online thing, but also, yeah, I still train one to one. I love that aspect too. So it's one of those things I love. I enjoy doing both. In an ideal world, I'll continue to do both. Maybe skew it a little bit more towards online as the years go on. But yeah, I love my one-on-one people as well.
By the way, I love the RevFit representation. Jason Leonards
Yeah,
is one of my
Jason
favorite people
Leonards. Yeah,
ever.
represent.
So,
It's like,
yeah, Mike, have you noticed any sort of like hard transitions into online coaching since everything kind of changed with GLP-1s? And did it affect your business and how do you approach it? I know you and I, we have same kind of a mindset of let's not fear monger people just so maybe we can, I don't know, like attain a couple of new clients about like client retention and all of that shit, lying to people and making these wild um just like wild statements and blowing the side effects out of proportion just out of
hmm
fear.
yeah,
There's been a lot of that going on in our industry right now from shitty coaches who are terrified
yeah,
of losing
yeah,
clients. And I'm like, if you need to do that, then you should really reconsider your career. And
totally.
I mean, at the end of the day, for me personally, I think anyone who's not interested in coaching because they would rather go with the route of Ozempic, I think they're missing the point of what that actually is and what coaching is.
hmm
And therefore, there wouldn't be a good client, a good fit for me, anyways. So I think from that perspective, I'm always going to be fine because I'm always going to attract people that like me for who I am, people who like you for who you are. I don't think there's ever going to be a GLP-1 that's going to make people not go with you on your retreats, right? So
Yeah.
did your business suffer in any way? Have you noticed any negatives about it? And generally, like, how do you approach it?
Yeah, first question is no, no, it hasn't affected my business negatively in any way or capacity. And Yeah, I think you just sort of set the table there. I think, whenever something, I guess it's not really new, but whenever something sort of game changing or really industry changing kind of comes along, like I think we create this dichotomous approach. We create almost camps, right? It's this way or the other way. And I think that's the first mistake. And when we look at this, it's like people are propping this up as either we're losing weight the quote unquote natural way, or we're going the GLP-1 route. And it's just a really narrow-minded way to look at it, right? When we look at the totality of health and we look at all the different factors that go into that decision, I think we do it a great disservice. So, I've always been like, hey, come as you are. If you had, I've worked with people with gastric banding surgery, gastric bypass surgery, and people that are on GLP-1. So nothing changes in terms of what is needed from a coaching perspective in terms of like the mechanics of, okay, so you got to strength train and, eat enough protein and make sure you're getting a lot of, the micronutrients you need. That doesn't change if you're on a GLP-1, right? Obviously, fast weight loss is going to cause a little bit faster muscle loss as well. But, that's for any extreme weight loss method, or not, I wouldn't even call it extreme, any fast weight loss, let's say. So whether or not you are on a GLP-1 drug, the coaching aspect is still there. We still need people that need guidance. We still need people that need, strength training and other types of programming. So no, yep. So to answer your question, I have not noticed that at all. And what's your take on that? Is that something you've noticed too? Are your clients sort of asking you more about it, or?
Yeah, man, here's what I think about it in the context of general conversation about this. I think we should not be afraid as coaches to discuss our fears of like losing our jobs because of something
Mhm.
like that, especially us who have a lot of experience in coaching people specifically in the context of weight loss. I sort of pull parallels from my former copywriting career, right? So as soon as ChatGPT got released, everyone was like, holy crap, we're going to lose our jobs. Because
Mhm.
why would anybody hire me to write emails, like 4 emails a month, and pay me $1,000 for that when they can just enter a prompt into a program and they get it like in a minute. And if they need 1,000 revisions, they can get it.
Mm.
And in all actuality, if you look at what the written content has become today, it's abhorrent. So people who are crafty in writing, I think they're going to get even more value today than they were, let's say, in the last couple of years. Because in the last couple of years, everybody was test piloting what AI language models can do. And they realized that like this really doesn't work. It's just soulless gibberish, right?
Mhm.
So I sort of see this current period with GLP-1s becoming more and more popular is that I think it's going to help people like you and I because it's going to filter out terrible coaches and therefore we are going to get more clients. And the reason why I believe that and the reason it's already happening for me, but on the other hand, you have to take into consideration that not all people are just oblivious what GLP-1s actually do, right? So people who know that they're going to get to their desired weight much faster, much easier. They also know that in order for them to maintain those results, they need to make certain lifestyle changes. They need to acquire a certain set of skills. They need to learn how to maintain their muscle mass. Therefore, they have to even force themselves to resistance training, right? They need to learn how to become more active. Only this time around, they're going to do that with a smile on their face because they're not going to be compressed with this pressure of just this gnawing pain of I'm not losing weight, I'm fat, I can't look at myself in a mirror, I can't stop thinking about food. Yes, you made this great nutritional plan for me, coach, but I make this meal and then while I'm making this meal, I'm thinking about the following meal and then comes the evening and then I don't have enough calories for dinner and then I say screw it and then I just go overboard and then I say I'll like there's none of that noise. And for a
Yeah.
lot of people that is amazing. And for us coaches, it just makes our lives much easier. And this is
Yeah.
where terrible coaches get lost because all they see is client retention. They don't actually see that in this way you're going to be able to help people much more efficiently and effectively because you are working with someone who now has fewer hurdles to jump You know
Mhm.
what I mean? So like for
Yeah.
me, I'm highly optimistic. Only we have to also take into consideration that as coaches, we probably have to adapt our marketing, adapt our reach, our approach, the way that we educate people, because GLP-1s are not going away and they're going to become either a remarkable tool in the hands of us who actually care for people and
Mhm.
who want people to get better, and also us who want to work exclusively with people who actually want coaching, if you know what I
Yeah.
mean, right? Because there are
100%.
a lot of people who think coaching is just this magic service where you press this button and there's the outcome in like 6 months,
Yeah.
9 months, 3 months from now, right?
Yeah.
So we're gonna get I would say higher quality of clients. That's
Mhm.
kind of my standpoint, and I'm pretty sure that we are 100% in line based on your content and what I saw from you talking about GLP-1s. And yeah, man, I will also add one more thing, and I apologize if this was a long
No,
ass
that's okay.
monologue. But I truly do believe, and I sort of think in the same way about GLP-1s as I think about steroids. GLP-1s, you can abuse them. In other contexts, it's probably like mandatory. It's essential for some people, right? So when we look at steroid abuse, we can say that IFBB pros do not abuse steroids, anabolic steroids, because that's the name of the game. That's the tool for them to come to that point, right? So with GLP-1s, I'm 100% going to die on this hill saying that for some people it's absolutely mandatory. And I think GLP-1s are going to have the most drastic, most positive effect on general global obesity epidemic. I think GLP-1 single-handedly can destroy and completely halt obesity globally. However, when it comes to abuse, I'm talking about celebrities, I'm talking about people who want to lose 2 kilos of fat before summer, but they just can't force themselves to do extra 4,000 steps. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So like
100%.
that's that sort of thing is almost like, I don't know, like going to an underground lab to get insulin so that you can get jacked, while at the same time people who need insulin can't reach it. So
Mhm.
for me, those connotations make sense. Those connections make sense between GLP-1s and like steroids, right?
Mhm.
So that's how I see it. What's your take on this?
Yeah, no, 100%. You said a lot of great things there. And I think I have to emphasize too to people, it's like our job as coaches is to become as well informed as humanly possible about GLP-1s. But our job is absolutely not to say whether somebody is a good candidate or is not a good candidate, because that's a conversation between them and their own doctor, not an internet doctor, right? Just their own doctor. And then and we work within that. So GLP-1 use can be very, very favorable when indicated, right? We always have to add that at the end of that, when indicated. And you're right, anytime a new intervention comes through like this, so it's ripe for abuse and misuse. And yeah, there are people out there that want that quick fix, quote unquote. But yeah, our job as a coach is to guide them, regardless of what decision they choose to make. And that's not for me to say, okay, yeah, you should give this a try, or no, you shouldn't because of all these side effects. Yeah, these side effects exist, and yes, that's something that you're going to work with your doctor on, and you don't push through side effects that are severe enough to sort of derail you in some capacity. But for sure, I think it's a good comparison, a good analogy, and I think what you touched, I'll touch on one more thing that you said is that it kind of gives us or gives people the leeway to attain those skills. So again, we talked about in this vein of the false dilemma of like, okay, you either take a GLP-1 or you
Yeah,
do it
yeah,
naturally, right? We have this sort of gatekeepy thing as fitness professionals. It's always the people that will never ever need it that are the most opposed to it. That's just how that is. But what you mentioned there too is, sometimes people need that clarity to be able to attain the skills. Because one of the pushbacks you'll see is like, oh, well, GLP-1s don't teach you the skills and the mechanisms you need to keep that weight loss off. Okay, true. But sometimes those give people the clarity, and it takes away some of that noise that allows them to learn
yep.
those skills. Right. So in that case, it's good. And in essence, it does make our jobs a little bit easier. And we pivot and we adapt to what they're doing and what their needs are.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that we agree on this. Let's say we have a person who eats like, 1,200 calories a day. They seemingly can't lose weight. Now, obviously, we can do detailed inspection why this is. We look at the movement, we look at potential underreporting and stuff like that, right? However, that proverbial person, they still believe that they're eating 1,200 calories. So there's this huge pressure on. They now think GLP-1 is going to sort all my issues. I'm finally going to lose weight and I'm not going to be hungry. However, I would say that this is where skill acquisition in the context of maintenance is extremely important, because now we agree on this part that if they take GLP-1s and they don't have this hunger noise that everyone talks about, and I experienced this myself as well, then it gives you freedom to, operate more logically, less, I want to say emotionally, but I don't mean this in a negative way. I mean, you're not going to constantly be stressed out of your mind because you're feeling hungry. So this gives you clarity. This gives you time and space to actually learn those skills. But if you're eating 1,200 calories, 1,500 calories, and that's kind of, you hit a plateau. So maybe there are certain hormonal issues. Maybe it's the age. Maybe it's just general lack of movement because of busyness and schedule and single mom who has 6 kids, right? So stuff like that. Okay. So there are certain excuses that are legit why people can't move enough, for example. So like you're at that very low, like poverty calorie kind of an intake. You take GLP-1s, you don't care about anything other than losing weight. You don't acquire any skills. You don't care about that. You're not sort of investing any energy into even considering training and moving more. What happens is that you'll probably have to make a decision to remain on those sort of solutions, GLP-1s meaning, for the rest of your life, or you're just going to continuously yo-yo diet. Now, instead of food, you're just going to use GLP-1s, right? Because if you're struggling at 1,500 calories at certain weight, once you lose 10, 20, 30 pounds, that caloric intake gets drastically even lower. So now when you get off GLP-1s and you don't have any skills, now you're in a much bigger problem. Do we agree on this, right? Because skills, I think they are important, but at the same time, using skills as an excuse or a way to fearmonger people away from GLP-1s, I think that's just wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I agree. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. They're hand in hand, right? I mean, with GLP-1, use or whatever your intervention is, it has to be coinciding with those lifestyle interventions. And that's sort of almost a non-negotiable. And hopefully this is something that physicians and those that prescribe it will do decide that that is the route they want to take, right? And oftentimes it is something that you do take indefinitely. So we use the same analogy, you wouldn't stop taking, what happens when you stop taking your blood pressure medication? Well, your blood pressure goes up. If you stop strength training, there's atrophy, there's, sarcopenia might set in eventually, right? So yeah, these are things that, you have to be aware of. And I think there are a lot of people that, I'll just do it for like a couple months until summer. And then, it'll be, I'll just let everything else take care of itself. But every individual is different. But yeah, I think we'll encounter all kinds of scenarios as the, the years go by.
And it's kind of exciting as well. Like we can't just look at everything from this doom and gloom perspective. Oh my God, they're coming after our jobs. We're all going to be replaced with these new technologies. No, that's not going to happen ever, right? People always need people. I don't think there's a single person who bought into Mike Howard because of like copy on your website, right? Like everybody bought because they know who Mike Howard is and they want to work with Mike Howard. I mean, right? People buy people. People don't buy services anyway. So I know this sounds corny as shit, but I think it's also
true.
It's also true.
Yeah, no, 100%.
One thing that I've noticed with my clients who are using GLP-1s is that there's a pretty drastic change in how we approach goal setting. I'm comparing my general coaching experience before GLP-1s and now, when they are so easily accessible. Like it's just so much fun, so much more fun, man, to talk about strength training, to talk about just like moving more, to talk about what can we do to like slowly and gradually change how we perceive nutrition, right? So like for a lot of people, because they don't have appetite, they are in a graver danger of consuming even fewer healthy nutrients, essential nutrients. So now people who think long term, they're like kind of like, hey, like let's try to figure out what the best way for me would be to change my nutritional plan, but slowly and gradually, because I'm not forced right now to
Hmm.
just think about weight loss, and then after the fact I'm going to start thinking about details. Like we can start digging into the nuance of nutrition
Hmm.
immediately. Plus, we're going to have a lot of fun with training and stuff like that. So you talk a lot about goals, after
Hmm.
goals. So this entire scenario with GLP-1s, have you noticed any difference in goal setting? That's question
Hmm.
part one. And part two would be to give me your take on what goals after goals mean for you.
Honestly, it probably doesn't change the framework of how I see goals too much from that perspective, but it does shift the emphasis even more away from the outcome goal. What I like to talk about when I say the goals behind the goals is basically what I'm talking about is process goals, and those become even more front and center, but they're still central to any framework when it comes to what you're trying to accomplish, right? And anything you're trying to accomplish, you work backwards. So people will come to you or they'll come to me and they say, well, I want to lose 35 pounds. Okay, well, what are the processes behind that? Let's work backwards. Okay, well, what do you have to do to accomplish that? Well, I've got to eat better. Okay, what does eating better entail? Well, it entails cooking more. Okay, what does that entail? That entails grocery shopping regularly. That entails changing my home environment. There's a lot of different things. So those are the process and the systems goals, right? I think there's no difference between how I look at goal setting then versus now because I think they still apply. They might be more amplified now because we can actually, maybe if they're on a GLP-1 of some kind, maybe that actual outcome piece takes care of itself. And like you said, we could work on the fun shit. We can get them like training, we can get them
Yep.
retaining
Yeah.
muscle tissue, we can get them, and like you said too, like with eating, it becomes a little bit more there's more moving parts too because it might be they may not tolerate certain foods the way they used to. So you might just be like, okay, we're going to do the basics here. We're going to take that systems and process approach and say, okay, we're going to grocery shop for these foods and we're going to keep them front and center, eye level, and we're going to see what you can let's see what you tolerate. So we're going to look at that lowest hanging fruit, the minimal viable action that you can take that's going to move that needle, retain that muscle tissue, keep your cardiometabolic health in the best place it possibly can be, and not try to get, like you said,
Hmm.
too deep into the weeds, too deep into the very very nuances of it. We have to kind of see, okay, how's this going to take with you, right? Because we know that sort of nausea, GI issues are some of the more common side effects of GLP-1 use. So a lot of times it's like, okay, what's working for you right now, and how can we make these little tweaks, and how can we set up these processes so that you are going to give yourself a better chance at healthier food options or exercise options? Where are we going to give you these access points? Where are we going to reduce friction? So that's what I mean when I
Hmm.
say like goals behind the goals, right? We were looking at those, and those weight loss chips will fall where they may, right? And it's okay to have
Hmm.
those outcome goals, but we know now that we have some of that help that we kind of needed to let those chips fall where they may from a scale standpoint, from a tape measurement standpoint, from a body fat standpoint. But yeah, now we can focus on those nuts and bolts of your lifestyle change.
Dude, you know how often we talk, and I know you talked about this as well, when the body scale can oftentimes, instead of just being a tool, it becomes like the saboteur of progress. I can see GLP-1s becoming that as well for some people, especially when it comes to over reliance. So now that we can get like GLP-1s and we can see them like everywhere. So how do you help people make non-medication habits? How do you make them compelling and attractive without sounding preachy or outdated?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think, regardless of what their situation is, what their actual outcome goal is, I think we always want to look at non-scale victories and get them excited about those.
Mhm.
So, and that's always been my approach is say, okay, the scale, that's just one little piece of it. And yeah, it's a data point, but it can become a saboteur when that becomes the point of absolute focus, when it becomes an arbiter of your emotional state, right? So I
I
think
like that. Yeah.
yeah, that's one of those pieces where I'm like, okay, that's a bit of a red flag, and that's why we want to really push a few more steps that week. Oh, look, you got a little bit of a PR on your chest press there. You're feeling better. You're feeling more energized. You're feeling a little bit more confident. You're feeling like you have some competence. You're feeling less pain, a little bit more energy, and we really get them to buy into those those factors, those attributes that are very, very real. I'm not anti-scale. I mean, I'm not one of these throw away your
Hmm.
scale type of
Yeah.
people. I do believe in what gets measured gets managed. So whether that's tracking of calories or macros or that has its place, absolutely. And the scale is just part of that, right? But when you're attaching your if you give the scale the ability to alter your mood, for let's say an entire day, and then take drastic action in response to that, that's when it becomes a saboteur. So it goes from being helpful and data to being, potentially detrimental.
Yeah, I agree. And that's what I meant when I said that I can see GLP-1s as well becoming a saboteur because of
Mm,
potential over-reliance on that one tool.
yeah.
Because scale can become a tool, or it can become something that you dread of, confronting. Because at some point, you will have to confront the fact that you cannot use GLP-1s permanently. There has to be a time and place when you say like it's unhealthy to go any further with this, or enough is enough, or whatever, right? So you use it as a tool, and I think mindset reframing when we start using GLP-1s is absolutely crucial. Because if you approach it from a standpoint that finally there's a cure for my disease, I think you're screwed. But if you see it as something like, okay, cool, this is something that I put into my body that helps me regulate my hunger signaling, just kind of being very logistic, very methodical about it, almost being very like forcefully scientific about it, rather than seeing it as a cure. I think that's going to help a lot of people approaching it from that standpoint. Sort of like I mentioned, the connection between, like, not the connection, but the connotation between like the steroids, right? Anabolic
Hmm.
steroids and GLP-1s. So if you see steroids as something that you derive self-worth out of, or results that you gain from it, the moment where you step off it is going to be the moment where you're going to realize you're kind of like an addict, right? And
Hmm.
this is exactly why I think reframing how we use this tool and how we see this tool, even before we start using it, can be absolutely crucial. Here's how I see it, man. If I, back in like 2009, where I weighed like around 400 pounds, if GLP-1s were accessible back then, I would be on them
Hmm.
100%. But, and I'm not, and I'm truly not being an asshole here, and I'm not trying to diminish anyone's struggles or anyone's decision to go on GLP-1s. If I knew that I'd turn out this way, learning all the skills and learning so much about myself through my journey of not just losing almost 200 pounds, but maintaining my results for over a decade. Like, I wouldn't be the person I am today if I didn't have that experience, because that
Hmm.
experience transitioned and is applicable in every other facet of my life.
Hmm.
So if I knew back then that I had two choices: remain pretty much unchanged and be slimmer, or struggle and go through a lot of pain and sacrifice and trials and tribulations, but become a man I am today, right? Um, I don't think I would choose GLP-1s at that point.
Hmm.
But
Love that.
if I just, yeah, right, you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
absolutely. It made you who you are.
I
It
would.
built a lot of character and characteristics, and yeah, yeah, that's awesome, man.
So I would say, and this is my advice for anyone listening now, or maybe in the future when this podcast actually becomes more popular, right? For anyone listening and who are having the dilemma whether to go with GLP-1s or maybe to give it a proper shot in getting those results in any other way, I would say, like, if you have a chance and if you have willingness to just like challenge yourself, I would go with that route. I would highly recommend that route,
Hmm.
100%. And I'm not trying to be like, in any sort of way discriminatory, but I would especially recommend this for younger men. But
Hmm.
right, so like, if you need to lose, let's say, like 50 pounds and you have a ton of spare time, just give it a shot. Give it a
Hmm.
proper shot. If you tried to lose weight before and you lost 10 pounds and you kind of went on to yo-yo dieting, like, realistically, that's not a proper shot. But like,
Hmm.
if you can put yourself into the mindset of, you know what, I'm gonna find the best way to grind this shit out without being detrimental to my health, finding a correct way to do this without potentially using tools that I might personally perceive later on as I use shortcuts, even though I'm not saying that GLP-1s are shortcuts because some people need them. But
Hmm.
dude, for other people, they are shortcuts. I'm just saying,
Mm,
if I put myself into that perspective, so for example, if I build 20 pounds of muscle. And then I realized, okay, I built these 20 pounds of muscle in the last year because I used a ton of anabolics. I don't think I'm going to be as much proud if I knew that I built 20 pounds of muscle through consistent training for 5, 6 years. You know what I mean?
mm,
I think there is something to that. And I think for people who are on the fence, do they need GLP-1s or don't?
mhm.
I think for the majority of people, in the most cases, if you have the dilemma, the answer is probably no.
Yeah, I agree. And I've had clients in that predicament where I would say something to the effect of this. I said, and this is if they're on the fence. They're just like, yeah, I don't know. I've got reservations. I'm like, that's perfectly valid. And I said, okay, well, what about this? What if we just go really full on, full send with this for 6 months, right? We get you on some sort of strength training, nutrition plan and you give it 6 honest months effort and see what happens. And I frame it this way, okay, if you didn't reach the exact goal that you wanted, whether that's a certain weight or a certain size, what's the worst that can happen? You get fitter, you lost a little bit of fat, right? And I think
Hmm.
there's something to that for sure, Darko, where somebody's like, okay, I want to see what I can potentially do, and know that that's okay at the end of that 6 months. If you still decide GLP-1 probably is the right play, at least you knew, at least you gave it that shot, right? You don't want to be like, oh yeah, I'll just go with that first, and then we see what happens. It's, I think, in a lot of cases when people are on the fence, that is the play, is just like, okay, let's see what you're capable of. Let's see what you can do in this 6 months, and giving it the best effort that you can
Hmm.
in whatever circumstance you're in life right now. And then that way, you know, they still acquire some skills. And if they do decide to go on a GLP-1 6 months later, that's a learning process that they've already got under their belt in terms of creating these habits that are better eating, cooking skills, lifting skills, that sort of thing. They've already got these things partially in place. And then they know, okay, yeah, that just the food noise became a little bit too much. The rebounds became a little bit too much. I still had a hard time with that, emotional control over food. So then, okay, yeah, we revisit it. It's not a failure. It's more data, right?
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And a lot of my clients who use GLP-1s, they kind of went, on that train because they're just kind of exasperated with all the relapses they had. I will say this: there is a certain threshold where relapses become, or you realize that they're extremely valuable. As you said, on one hand, it's data. On the other hand, it teaches you a lot about yourself. And also, relapses a lot of times, if you approach them with a calm state of mind and methodically and logistically, they will show you the right way eventually. But there is also this threshold, Mike, where I believe where people go through so many relapses that they just kind of quit, you know,
Yeah.
and they just say like, screw this, I am not for this anymore. This is not meant for me. I'm always going to be like this. I never can get the handle of this. And when it comes to relapses, that's kind of what I see with clients. One of the main reasons why they do that is because the relapses, right? But you have also very original take on relapses. If I'm not mistaken, you have like a system, right?
Mm.
When it comes to
Yeah.
relapses, like there's a 3-step relapse process.
Mhm.
But I do remember, I'm really sorry about this because I cannot recall all 3 steps, but I know that one of the steps is literally talking about this screw it mentality. So, can you give me like a real life example of this?
Yeah, for sure. I think the first thing about this is knowing that these lapses are going to happen. And what separates the people that, we mentioned stats, and the stats of weight regain are extraordinarily high. And what separates the ones that actually are able to maintain successfully, the ones that are able to attain a certain level of continued success, they're the ones that manage those lapses, those dips. So I think the first thing is that inner voice that says, okay, let's just take a breath, right? Okay, we don't need to eat the rest of that row of cookies. Okay, we ate it, that's fine. So we go through this sort of, I think, you know self-compassion is highly underrated. So from us, we approach this with self-compassion. It's like, okay, I messed up. It's okay to be frustrated with yourself too. Let me just add that too, like, not too frustrated, but like frustration is going to feel normal, right? So then people will get upset about them feeling natural emotions around,
Yep.
their
Yeah.
lapses, right? So it's like it becomes this vicious cycle. So where you're like, okay, you know what? That tasted great. It happened. Let's just move on. So the second part of that, and you mentioned it, you alluded to it too, is just okay, when those lapses happen, are you learning something from it? So there's that self-reflection piece, right? So there's self-compassion, but there's also self-reflection. So what was the trigger? What was the antecedent that led to me overeating? Yeah, I had a bad day at work. It was stressful. I hadn't eaten in too long, so it was just like, okay, I hit up that bakery and that was it. And then so you just sort of pause and breathe and say, okay, we're going to stop this here. It happened. That's fine. It does happen. What did I learn from it? Oh yeah, it was a stressful day, and that was the trigger and the response. I ate something. So next time, I'm going to make sure that I just do a little bit of breathing exercise. I make sure that I've a healthy meal at some point before that. I'm better prepared, and then we just move on. We just move on and say, okay, right back at it. What's my first step back? I have this saying where you're never more than 5 minutes away from finding your first easy step back, your first healthy step back without overcompensating, without this sort of binge restrict cycle. Just, okay, get back into normal eating, normal healthy eating. So that would be the three steps. So it's just kind of pause, breathe, reflect on it, self compassion with self reflection, and then move on, move the hell on. It happened. And those are the people that attain the best long-term success, is the ones that can manage those dips, the ones that can manage those lapses and just take them in stride and say, okay, I messed up. And then guess what happens? There's a longer interval between those lapses, and those lapses are shorter lived, right? So
Hmm.
they're going to happen. I think going in that mentality that this is a matter of when, not if. It is going to happen, and how am I going to respond when this happens, right? So I say, okay, that's okay. And yeah, it is frustrating. I'm sure you're frustrated, and that's okay too to be frustrated. But don't dwell on that frustration. Just move on.
You essentially just explained my experience with addiction, with substance abuse. You go from daily abuse to weekly to monthly, and then you kind of like this is not even me. And then I was kind of like, you know what? I still occasionally enjoy this.
Mm,
So let me try to have a better relationship with this substance. Okay. So this
mhm,
substance at
mhm,
a certain dosage can provide me with certain different expression of fun and reflection and stuff like that, right? So I reached this point, dude, where, I can freely eat whatever I want, right? So I don't feel like a food addict. I can use substances and not abuse them. You know what I mean? Right? So
mhm,
like to come from a perspective from a place where I was literally addicted to certain substances to a place where I have I would say very liberal but healthy relationship with those substances,
mhm,
and that I'm never going to allow myself to abuse anything. I think for me, that's a bigger win than to kind of completely cut them off out of my life,
mm,
because those substances were a massive part of my upbringing, my personality, my identity, or whatnot, right? So now when I'm an adult in my 40s now, I can still look at them and I can tell myself I can have them whenever I want. I just choose not to right now because this is not the time and place for it. But if
mhm,
there is time and place for it, and I know that I'm in a safe place surrounded with people who are safe, then I'm kind of fine with that, right? That goes with same with food, that goes with anything, that goes with alcohol as well.
mm,
And I really think that if I didn't have relapses, I would not be able to do that.
mhm,
Because for some people, relapses represent a countdown to when they either die, proverbially or literally, or when they just go cold turkey off that thing that made them that way. So
mhm,
I think there is strength in relapses. But now, when we talk about GLP-1s, dude, imagine right now and in the future, few years from now, how much more fun is going to be to work with people who can use GLP-1s to either reduce the number of relapses, or at the very least to think
mhm,
that there is this safety net.
mhm,
There is this safety net. So whatever happens, I know that I can go that route and I'm going to be
mhm,
fine. And I think for a lot of people, just knowing that there's a safety net can mean
mm,
that they will never go there, and also can mean that they will never relapse as much as they usually would, because
mm,
there is no desperation attached to that process. Does that make sense, or am
mhm.
I rambling here?
No, no, it does make sense. Yeah, it makes total sense.
Awesome.
And I think you have so much to sort of give in terms of like your experience of it. So I appreciate you sharing that. And then, well, if you don't mind me asking, so when it comes to your amazing sort of, transformation, but more importantly and more impressively, your decade plus of maintenance, what is it that people get wrong about maintenance? What is something you want to tell them that they're not, that they're probably ill prepared for when it comes to their own maintenance? Like, let's say somebody's lost a great amount of weight, they're in a maintenance kind of phase, as it were, right now. What would you say to them that is maybe a misconception or, something they might not feel prepared
First thing that comes to mind is that the same amount of effort that took you to, create that transformation or to go from point A to point Z is the same kind of effort that you need to now apply to maintain it for the rest of your life, which is just ridiculous. It doesn't make any goddamn sense. So the best analogy that I have for this is muscle gain. So it takes you a lot of time to build muscle tissue, but it takes you very low effort in comparison to maintain that same amount of muscle. You don't have to do or apply that same amount of effort and physical exertion to maintain that same amount of muscle. So you can literally do like one full body training session a week and literally be able to maintain like 90% of that muscle that you build with absolutely ridiculous intensity of training with high volume even, right? So like for me, and this is something that I wrote recently on Facebook, is that discipline is not something that you kind of build and then you have to maintain and you always have to force yourself to do it. Like, no, dude, honestly, I swear to God, I know I lost around 200 pounds, but the discipline that I had to build for it literally lasted for like the first couple of weeks. After that, it was just autopilot. Obviously, I had, as we spoke before, relapses. But relapses were just a new pathway for me to find the right way. And that's sort of how I look at it. Did I struggle? Yeah, absolutely. But I struggled with what I thought was the right way for me, and it wasn't.
hmm
Right?
hmm
So I never struggled with maintenance per se. I just struggled with finding new ways to progress. Right. But when it comes to maintenance, I have been successfully maintaining, and I can't even say that I maintained, I progressed.
hmm hmm
I think that's the main misconception, and I think that's the main issue with people who are kind of like, hey, even if I lose 100 pounds, like, do I still have to eat chicken rice and broccoli for the rest of my life? Only? And it's never like that. And this is why, again, we can bring it back full circle when we talk about GLP-1s. This is why new skill acquisition is so important, because it helps you maintain what you learned. So again, dude, I know this might probably piss off some people who are into this alpha macho bullshit that, I work and I grind every single day. Like, no, you're not. If you're doing that, you are by definition an idiot. Right? Because if in your work every single day, do you just completely free flow it and then you at the middle of your day, like, oh my God, I forget to pick my kid from school. No, like that's systemized, right? That's in your schedule. That's on your mind. You've been doing that for the last 15 years. You know you have to pick your kid at 4 p.m. That's sort of how I see it. You go through the process of systemization of everything that you learn and it becomes automated. What's the biggest best-selling book in the last 5-6 years is James Clear's Atomic Habits. So like what's the main point of that book that everyone got, which is you build a habit and it becomes automated and you move on to the next habit, and then all of a
hmm
sudden you have this big pile, big stack of habits that are
hmm
just making you maintain whatever you do on autopilot. That's what definition of a habit is. You learn a skill, you do it on repeat for enough time in order for it to become automatic. You don't think about it anymore. You move on to the next habit, and that's pretty
mm
much it. That's how I made it. This is why I have never really used my transformation to fearmonger people into buying
hmm
my service or
hmm
to misrepresent myself in any sort of like sleazy marketing way.
mm
Because some people can perceive me that I'm humble bragging when I tell them that it wasn't really that big of a deal. And I speak from a God honest place when I say that. However, now I'm just verbalizing it a bit differently.
hmm
It was extremely, excruciatingly, painfully difficult to reach a point where I decided to change. But after that, everything was about habits. Everything was about learning stuff that's authentic to me, that works for
hmm
me.
Mhm.
And in doing so, I made a lot of terrible choices. In doing so, I've chosen many different paths that were not carved out for me, even when it comes to simple stuff like training, when it comes to nutrition, especially, when it comes to lifestyle choices, when it comes to how I think about myself, think like motivations to push myself. But all of that is just a part of being an adult, right? Part of growing up.
Mhm. Mhm.
You talked about like transitioning into your 50s, and a month ago I transitioned into my 40s, right? So like I honestly, when I look back, I wouldn't change anything, man,
Mm.
because all of those mistakes that I've done just in my head make me an absolute expert when a client comes on a consultation call or a
Mhm.
weekly call and they tell me something and I'm like, dude, I don't need a textbook for this. I know exactly how they feel right here, right? So like
Mm. Mhm.
that's why I appreciate all those hurdles, all those relapses, and yeah, man, I
Yeah.
hope this gave you an answer to your question.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think it's a great story, and I think a lot of people can learn a lot from it, be inspired by it, and yeah, like you said, I mean, everybody's path is different, and you found a few different ways that didn't work, and I think that's all this is sometimes is like, finding what does work, and it's never gonna be a linear path. It's probably gonna take longer than you think, and it's probably gonna be harder than you think, and that's why I say, we have to look at these goals and these processes through sort of a lens of sacrifice. And if we don't like the word sacrifice, we could use the word compromise, right? Something's going to change, and that change is going to be hard. When our brain perceives change, it almost perceives an emergency. It's like, what the hell are you doing? Why are you doing this? We're comfortable. Don't you see how comfortable we are? We want to stay comfortable.
Mm,
And, and any type of meaningful and somewhat drastic change is going to require that kick to the comfort zone. And yeah, but there's a lot of ways to get uncomfortable and a lot of ways to approach this. And discomfort doesn't mean extremes. Discomfort doesn't mean, just beating yourself to the ground,
mhm.
because that's going to backfire on you too. But it is going to
Yeah,
be it's going to shake up your foundation a little bit and what you were used to, and that should be expected. And we have to look at these obstacles before they get to us, because then we're going to be better prepared to deal with them when they do come, right? Just that mental contrasting thing where, we approach this sometimes on New Year's Day, whatever it might be, or on our birthday, and we think, okay, well, we got this clear path ahead of us. Like, we assume that we're not going to be stressed. We assume that we're not going to be sleep deprived. We assume this magical world where everything is just going to give us this time to meal prep and live this life and never feel that temptation. But yeah, no, that's not what life is. It's going to throw us a lot of different things, and yeah, we have to be equipped for it in one way or another. And we're not going to win every battle, but if we win more of the
yeah,
battles than we lose them, then you're going to come out on the other side of that much better than you were before.
yeah, man. Damn, this is awesome. You asked the absolutely right question for us to kind of conclude this. We can continue just and go through a few more topics that I listed if you want to. If not, I'm perfectly fine to cut it off here. One thing that I think is going to be extremely attractive with this sort of podcasting is that you and I we just had a conversation, so it might
Hmm.
throw people off. You know, like people who are into podcasting, they're going to listen to this podcast, right? So I made a good couple of points. You finished it poetically.
You asked some great questions too, by the way. This was
Absolutely,
awesome,
brother.
man. I love the
Absolutely. Yeah,
format, and I appreciate you, and I thank you for your
yeah,
time
man.